Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to today's podcast brought to you by KLSU News. I'm Kathryn Slaton.
And I'm Criddell, and today we have the pleasure of being joined by award-winning veterinarian and professor Dr. Taylor Strickland.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dr. Taylor Strickland. I am probably the newest faculty member at LSU's veterinary school. Happy to be here, and probably what you'll learn through this is I like cows a lot, and that's mostly what I do. I'm a cow doctor, so.
Well, we're so happy to have you on today. We're going to get started with some questions. Okay, Dr. Strickland, what exactly do you do at LSU, and can you tell us what a day in your life would kind of look like?
Yeah, so what I do, I am an assistant professor of food animal medicine and surgery. So what that encompasses is kind of, you think about all your hooved creatures, right? We see everything pretty much except for horses, donkeys. So I see cows, goats, sheep, pigs, llamas, alpacas. If you have a giraffe, bring it. And so what my day looks like, I usually get to the clinic. I have wonderful, wonderful interns who are new graduate veterinarians from the School of Veterinary Medicine, and they are looking at patients. We have students who are also looking at patients every morning, and I kind of check in with them, see how everyone is done overnight, because with the vet school and with the hospital and facilities that we're very lucky to have, we can do inpatient medicine, so we can keep patients overnight. Then we'll kind of go throughout the day and see who needs what done, take care of everybody. And then we may have, the occasional emergency come in. You never know when your goat's not going to be able to go to the bathroom anymore, and that becomes a problem really quickly. You never know when your potbelly pig is going to eat a sock, and that's also a problem. So they'll come in, and we'll take care of them all the while. I think the best part about what I do, my kind of particular sector of vet med being in what we call academia, is that while I'm getting to practice veterinary medicine, I also have students around me who I'm teaching and are getting to learn. So that's kind of what we do in a day. It like I said, it could be anything from trimming cow feet, so doing a little mani-pedi on a bull, to looking at somebody's potbelly pig and maybe I have to sing a pig a lullaby or two to make them feel comfortable in the clinic. You do what you got to do. Or I might be delivering, some goat babies. That's the fun part of it is you could ask me what my day looks like on any given day, and I could give you a wildly different answer. But I'd still give you an answer probably with a smile and maybe a lot of dirt on my face.
Well, that all sounds awesome. So what made you decide to enter this field?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small rural community. I was in southwest Georgia, and we had a small herd of commercial or mixed breed beef cattle that my family, all the way back to my granddad, had always kind of been involved, and that's just a very rural agricultural part of Georgia. So we had a little herd, and in that, we also showed these cattle. So you can exhibit cattle, livestock. And so that's what I did. I showed cows all the way from fourth grade until I graduated. And then even when I got to college, I found a way to get back in the show ring, and I did. And so all the while, it just kind of made sense to me that I really liked being around these animals. I really liked being around the people that kind of were impacted by these animals or that, cared for these animals. But then I also was, a little bit of an overachiever. And so how could I, be a doctor and then also just be with cows all day? It's then be a cow doctor. And so that's kind of how I ended up here.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's a great journey. Can you tell us what food animal health is?
Yeah. I can, and then I also am going to try not to take an hour doing it, because food animal medicine to me is such a vast world, and maybe my bias is that I will always say that food animal medicine is the most rapidly changing and growing sector of veterinary medicine right now. And why that is because when we look at food animal medicine in a more traditional sense, it's production based, right? It's making sure that these animals are healthy so that they can go into a food production and provide really high quality sources of protein and other nutrients. And so we want them to be healthy enough to where they make a safe food product. It's keeping the food production and the food supply healthy. But then we look at the way it's changing and growing, and we have these show cattle that are very expensive and very valuable. They do still represent, a food supply, and that's in the end what you're advertising. But then we also move into our, quote unquote, pet food animals, farm animals. So we have the goats that come in and they have a bow in their hair. And we have the potbelly pig named Samantha, and she does sleep in her own bed. And so we have these pets that have this different value to them. And that's always kind of what has to be in the forefront of your brain is what is this animal kind of serving to this person, and how can I help them achieve whatever the goal is for them and this animal. And then one of my favorite sectors that I think a lot of people either don't think about or maybe have some misconceptions about would be what I like to call our bovine athletes. So you think of bucking bulls, these bulls in the rodeo. They are. It's not the old age of just going out and picking the meanest bull in the pasture. These are guys that know their job and they're good at their job. They have chiropractors, they have acupuncturists, they have nutritionists. They are athletes, and their owners love them and take really good care of them. So that's kind of another sector that's been really fun to watch grow and explore is these athletic cattle. So again, it becomes this spectrum of what is food animal medicine, again, so many things that, again, I could talk forever on just one of them. But I think that's what makes this job really, really fun again and different.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And on that note, what role does population play in food animal maintenance?
Yeah, it's another cool place where food animal veterinarians are probably some of the ones that are trained with population health at the forefront of the mind. The other one, that I would point you to would be like shelter medicine veterinarians. In that a lot of the times when we're trying to find out what's wrong, I can't just look at one animal. That's not as helpful to me versus looking at the herd, as a whole. So we're looking at a lot of epidemiology and statistics of incidence, prevalence, and seeing kind of can we track back to patient zero, and then how has patient zero amplified whatever the issue was to the other members of the herd. And so it's definitely been a place where in the last couple of years, as we've seen through the pandemic and other things, where food animal veterinarians are kind of like, hey guys, we could be really useful. Like, hey, listen, we kind of know what's going on a little bit. And shout out to the human epidemiologists. I'm just trying to keep up with cattle and their numbers. I can't imagine a person and everything else. But it does kind of culminate, and a cool part, I guess, about the way that I was trained. So I did a master's degree in public health or in population health. That was my master's degree was really looking at the big picture. And then my residency training, so what my board certification will be in, is in internal medicine, which is really, really focused and honed in on the one. So I guess I couldn't pick a box to fit in, so I just keep my Zoom lens going in and out constantly. But I think it's fun, and it's definitely maybe a unique way to look at things in vet med. But again, like I said, it's been interesting to see how it applies to the rest of the world too, especially when we were trying to people getting vaccinated and going through and it taking time to do that. And we're like, man, you get a food animal veterinarian out there, we vaccinate a whole herd in like 30 minutes. We'll get it done, and it'll be quick. But yeah.
Okay. At what point in an animal's lifespan do farmers begin to sort of harvest non-meat products such as milk and eggs? And how long do they live before being harvested for meat products?
Yeah. So it's a little bit different when you go into the different sectors of it. So I'll try and kind of keep on one and then move to the other. So when we think about dairy products, in order for you to collect milk or any of the other products that come from milk, that cow has to first deliver a baby. There's no collecting milk and we're not having babies. Like, they're going to produce a calf every year. And so that usually happens around 2 years old, sometimes a little earlier, is when they're going to go through their first pregnancy and then their first lactation. And so that's when we'll start collecting milk. Those gals will go into a barn when they're in what we call the milking herd. And then when they're not, they're going to go into the dry off. And so they do get a chance to dry off and not be milked. And then they go outside and they live in the pasture, and then they do the cycle over again. And in that world of dairy, after about 6 or 7 years, it seems to be the average, we're doing things that are allowing these cattle to live longer into more like 7 or 8 years for their productive career. But at that point, you kind of look and say, hey, are they, quote unquote, doing their job, which is to produce a calf every year? And if they are, and they're doing it in a way that is productive, okay, you can stay in the herd and you keep your job. If they're not, that's when you explore other options of, could this cow go on to serve a different purpose? Could she be marketed for meat? And so that's one avenue of how we get beef. And then the other one, where the cattle are raised purely for that beef purpose. These are going to be younger animals that are typically going to be processed around 1-ish years old. Those are going to be what we call stocker calves. So they'll go into the feedlot around 6-8 months old, stay there for a little bit, put a little bit of weight on, do what we can to adjust kind of the fat to muscle ratio as is desired. And then they'll go into the food chain to be processed. There can be other instances where we have cattle at different ages going into that food chain, and those are cattle that have come down with, an acute injury, say it's something that I can't fix, but it's something to where the quality of the product is not going to be affected. It's not going to be unsafe. It's not going to be bad. Those cattle can then be salvaged and used to feed someone. So we're really trying to do things in a way where we are maximizing the efficiency that we utilize these animals. So not only are they going into the food chain, so you think of the thing you go buy at the store, the prime rib, the chuck steak, whatever have you. And this is so funny because I did a speaking competition in the 3rd grade about this, and I've never shut up about it ever since. And that's byproducts. There's so many things that we are so lucky and grateful to get from these animals that you would never think about. So probably one of the things you would think about would be leather, right? But some brake fluids contain some of the joint components from cattle, some of the lubricants, things that have kind of phased out, but there are still some that involve cattle byproducts would be crayons. If you've ever noticed the logo for Elmer's glue is a bull, that's not by accident. And there's plenty of others, marshmallows, gelatin. These are all things that come from us finding ways to look to the way that cattle were used originally. When we think of Native people, they used as much of those animals as they could as a way of respecting and thanking them. And so we're still doing some of that today, as much as maybe you don't hear about it or you just don't know about it off the top of your head.
That's pretty cool. I feel like you wouldn't think about that kind of stuff, especially not the glue took me by surprise. The glue is a good one.
That's what, go home and look at your Elmer's glue stick and you'll find that it is a bull. That's what the logo is. And, some of those components have been replaced by some synthetic things, but some of them still reign true, that we are still trying to be very grateful for what these animals give us.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Is climate change affecting livestock right now?
I think it is. It's a good conversation to have. It's a conversation that I think for a lot of producers is scary, right? Because they're really being put at the forefront of, our cattle, the reason that we're seeing measurable changes in climate change. And I think there's room to better the way that we have some production systems. It's a little hard to articulate maybe to the average consumer of the ways we do that. So one way that we have done that in the past, trying to ameliorate kind of how much power and water is a big one that we know that production channels use, was when we introduced RBST to dairy cattle, decades ago, which is recombinant bovine somatotropin. It's a product that you can give dairy cattle essentially to help them produce milk at a more efficient rate. And it was scary when it first came out for a lot of people because what it breaks down to is a growth hormone. And so the concern, obviously, and very understandably to a consumer, is that growth hormone going to affect me? So we did a lot of research. We looked around. They do not. Growth hormones from other species cannot activate primate receptors, but primates can you can go the other way around. So don't inject it into a cow or she's going to get really buff. So those things that seem scary on one end do help us to mitigate some of those other things of maybe using more water and using more power that could be contributing to climate change when we look at bigger production systems. So it's something that's always on the forefront and something that I think producers and really veterinary scientists have opened up to say, hey, this is something that we need to just look at. It doesn't help to argue it if you don't have any, research or proof or data. And so there's a lot of research looking into how can we improve feed efficiency in cattle so that we aren't requiring as much feed to get the same amount of product. How can we feed them in a way that alters the big part of them that makes them cool, the rumen and ruminant, that big fermentation vat. There's ways that we can alter that changes kind of the chemical composition of those gases that come out of these cattle, methane from both ends. So there's a lot that we can do, and it's a lot to look into that I think can be overwhelming for the everyday consumer to read about and read at face value, which is why, again, I think we should talk about it, and I'm happy to do so. But I can tell you from all the conferences I've been at with other veterinarians, with food animal veterinary, researchers and scientists, with producers, is that it is a conversation we're having and trying to figure out what part do we play in that, because we do also have to take into account, we're still not going to overtake, the amount of emissions from cars and airplanes, and even when you look at coffee production in South America, we're not really quite on par with that. But that doesn't mean that we can't take the steps to say, hey, what's our part in this? How can we continue to have 2% of the population feeding the other 98%, but in a way that, we can continue to do that for more decades on?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And does the state of food animal health correlate to the health of humans at all?
I think so. I think it really does. In terms of, how many different ways could I even talk about it? I think, like I said, it goes back to population medicine and looking at the whole. Like the way that I can look at a herd of cattle and kind of read the dynamics, read where, not even just from a health standpoint, but even from a social standpoint, who's the head heifer in charge here? If you can kind of learn those dynamics and learn how to navigate them in a cattle herd, you may inadvertently begin to apply some of those things to people around you of like, okay, I see what's going on here. I see who's in charge. But then also seeing how much, the health of one of the members of the herd, one of the people, can affect the others, and not just in a one-to-one ratio, right? It can be an amplification. And so, again, I think we really saw that in the pandemic when you had to realize, oh, the things that I do really impact my neighbor, and they can really impact these people that I don't know a whole lot about them, but I could have an impact on their health. I could have an impact on their day, depending on how I conduct myself and kind of how I exist in the world. And I think that was a little bit of a wake-up call to some people. But again, if maybe you were someone that worked around herd things, you were like, we see what's going on. You went to the sale barn and you got new introductions to the herd and you brought them in and it got everybody else sick. We knew that was going to happen. You sent your kid to kindergarten and he came back with a flu. We knew that was going to happen. Like it just goes along with it. Other things I think would just be, I think there's a disconnect kind of between people and their food. I think I saw something on Facebook that was like, why would you drink milk from cows? That's so like crazy. Why don't you just go get it from the grocery store like everybody else? I'm just gonna hold your hand really, really gently when I tell you this. So food animal medicine and kind of how it's not maybe the most spoken about point of veterinary medicine, I think it, maybe contributes to that fact that people are a little bit disconnected from where their food comes from and what goes into making sure that food is wholesome and good for you to consume and put into your body. And yeah, kind of just food education, I think in general goes hand in hand with it.
Yeah, well, that leads perfectly into our next question, which is how does food animal health impact the safety of the food that we eat?
Yeah. It's actually, this is one of my favorite parts too. So one of my little niche interests in vet med, in food animal, is what we call pharmacology, which is really just a study of how these drugs interact with the animal, with, just as they are by themselves, with other drugs. And so that's a big part of food animal, and it's a big part of some regulations and legislation that we as food animal veterinarians have to follow that other veterinarians don't have to keep at the forefront of their mind. So I'll give you an example. Let's say Susie. We'll call her
Susie is perfect.
We'll call her Susie. Susie comes in, and Susie has a little bit of a cold. Susie has some snot coming from her nose. I cannot just go and pick up any antibiotic or any antimicrobial and give that to Susie. There are a number of antimicrobials that I'm not allowed to use as a food animal veterinarian, or that I'm not allowed to use in a certain way, or that I have to know what's called a withdrawal time for. And so what that time is how long after I give Susie this medication is she going to have to wait before food products are collected from her, so milk, meat. And those are things that we have to keep at the forefront of our minds as veterinarians for cattle or anything that's going to go into the food chain. And so that's a big part that I've always been interested in is that legislation. It's a whole document, and I kind of like to refer to it as somewhat of a Rosetta Stone because for a lot of people, it is really hard to understand, and you're already in vet school or being a veterinarian, and you're having to do the medical jargon, and then all of a sudden you also have to be a lawyer and read legislation. But what this legislation does is that it does enact these guidelines for what antimicrobials, what medications that I am putting into something that will come into contact with a human. In order to make sure that the product has no residue, so no drug residue. There are certain drugs that have an absolute zero tolerance. If it's detected, you're out. And then there are tolerable residues, which are things that are at such a low level that we know it's not going to have any measurable effect on your biology as a human versus a cow. And so that's where we come into play of really keeping things safe from a therapeutic standpoint. But then also, gosh, I don't really know if you want to eat Susie if she has that bad of a cold. And so part of walking in my door is going, okay, is Susie able to, one, go back to her job, go back to making little Susie, or is Susie ready to transition to another place of employment, say McDonald's? And is she even healthy enough to do that, right? There is always the third option of, hey, this she's really suffering. She's not at a point where I think she would be a wholesome food product either. This is a point where we start talking about humane euthanasia or, just letting Susie kind of live her time, and just let her live until she doesn't anymore. And so, again, it's not just making sure that things we put into these animals is safe for you to consume. It's also just making sure that, again, they're going to go on to produce a wholesome food product. So I make sure that cows are good and healthy enough for you to eat. So I'm like the pre-chef. I'm the pre-food inspector in a way.
Well, you can do it all. You're a lawyer, a food inspector, but I mean, what can't you do? And you do it down here in Louisiana. So what about this is important to Louisiana in particular?
Oh, man. This is a fun part, too. and this part goes even beyond just me, right? I really do see what you would call like farm animals. But when we think of food animals, and those two can be somewhat similar but different things, especially in the state of Louisiana, we've got other things that you eat and consume that veterinarians are overlooking that you would never think about. So for one, I would maybe start with, Louisiana being called the sportsman's paradise, right? And so you think of the wild game, the wild fowl that people enjoy going out and hunting. Those animals are impacted by communicable or contagious diseases that can sweep through and wipe out entire populations. A good example in the last few years was there was a high pathogenicity avian influenza, so a certain kind of bird flu. And it was first detected in dairy cattle in Texas. But the thing is that bird flu is crazy, influenza is crazy, and it can go from all these different hosts, from swine to cattle to birds. And we started seeing it in wild waterfowl, and that becomes, a problem in its own of, if Louisiana is depending on being a sportsman's paradise and really advertising this as a commercial aspect to draw commerce to the state, well, if your entire, duck population or goose population is now wiped out, or we have to put a temporary ban on harvesting those animals, that's a lot of commerce that you lose. And the people who are monitoring that and are making recommendations on how to mitigate that are veterinarians. Now that's with biologists and other scientists as well, but veterinarians play a part there that I don't think you'd think about. Other things would be what we call aquaculture. So you can farm fish, oysters, other things to be harvested, or even just overseeing wild populations. There are definitely going to be, fish biologists and oceanologists involved, but there's also going to be some veterinarians, especially when we look at more of the farmed situations, because sometimes fish need antibiotics too, and fish need vaccines too. Fish need doctors too, and they have them, and it's us. And so Louisiana, again, having a really rich kind of cultural history with really good seafood, we play a part in that as well. And if that were to become impacted for the state of Louisiana, that could be just devastating. So that's kind of a big part where we could play a part in Louisiana in particular. And then just going back to, there are still plenty of rural aspects of the state where we are raising cattle and other animals to be used for food. And the cool part sometimes about raising cattle and even goats too is that you look at land that maybe couldn't be used for anything else. You look at a swamp, you look at a marsh. Where I'm from, down in South Georgia, the big thing is row crops, but every once in a while you're going to have a field that just, she's not fit for that job. Well, guess what? You can put a fence around it, and you can put 30 head of cattle on it, and there you go. Now we're still producing something and still able to contribute to feeding. Again, like I said, it's 2% of the population feeding 98%. So those are just some of the ways that I think we as veterinarians kind of play into, why Louisiana and where Louisiana could benefit from continuing to foster, people going into veterinary medicine, having the school here, and continuing to support the school here.
Well, food animal health is so obviously important to so many people. So what can we, as Gen Pop, do to help support the health of animals?
Yeah, I think, really, I think the best thing would be getting people back in touch with where their food comes from and seeing that, and also knowing what you really get from food. I think, kind of a popular thing or a fad thing has become to somewhat demonize different kinds of food with not a lot of evidence to back that up. And so I think, especially in this generation, you guys are so internet literate is what I call it. And you're also constantly being thrown something new on the internet to try and read and digest. Is just to take some time and take that internet literacy and then maybe get some kind of scientific or even just trying to think of a word here. So some other kind of way, statistical something literacy to where you can take these things that you're seeing of why this food is bad or why something is bad and be able to interpret that with a level of skepticism, with a level of, okay, I need to go look this up for myself before, completely ruling out, hey, red meat is bad. Okay, well, why is it bad? Who is it bad for? When is it bad? Why, there's a ton more questions to be answered. So getting back in touch with food and getting back in touch with kind of having that critical thinking lens on, even when I know you're also being bombarded with a lot of things. Like you go on TikTok, you could scroll for 5 minutes and you're going to be watching essentially like an hour of content condensed down. Believe me, I'm guilty of it. But yeah, just going a step further and getting involved with where your food comes from, being interested in it, and then just being willing to listen to different conversations. And if you ever have a chance to get out and pet a cow, just go do that. And wash your hands really, really well afterwards, please. That could fix a lot of things if we just washed our hands really well. I think it's hard to answer maybe a little how to contribute to food animal health. I don't know, besides really getting your hands dirty, but then getting them clean again.
Well, I think that's a great answer and a great message, too, that we need to be researching and putting in critical thinking. So maybe it's not so bad to be always on that dang phone.
It's not. Like I said, y'all are... I envy this generation a little bit. You grew up with the internet. I was in the embarrassing time where the internet was new, so you will find really embarrassing videos of us when we first figured out what YouTube was. You guys have known that it's around, so you have all these resources. I think it's just, learning how to take a fine-tooth comb and go through those resources really well.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, we see that you have Susie here and also our beautiful picture. So if you want to introduce the little trinkets you brought, we would love to see them.
I've got kind of a little trio here because my other one is my belt buckle that I'm wearing.
That's so cute.
Cool. So I'll start with Susie. Here. Actually, no, I'll start over here. I'll start with the origin story. So this is me, a few years ago. I think I just graduated from undergrad, maybe.
Like last week.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Thank you. I have had so many people ask me if I was a student since I started working here. I was like, oh my gosh, the sunscreen's working, guys. So anyways, this is me, and this is Miss Thang. Miss Thang.
That's awesome.
She was my first show heifer. My dad had always raised a Simmental breed and Angus breed, which if you don't, they are a black-hided cattle. So they were all completely black, and I was like, I need something that looks cooler. And so I went out and I got, this is a shorthorn. So she is red and white. She has these beautiful spots all over her. And I showed her my first year when I was in the 3rd grade. I wish I had a picture of what I looked like then. I had buck teeth, and it was awesome. And then I ended up keeping her. I made my dad promise that we could keep her even if she never had a calf, which, surprise, she only had one. And we did. We kept her until she was 14. She passed of natural causes. I actually did keep her hide, and it is in my office, my first office as a professor. She's actually the only decoration I currently have in there. So she's still with me, and so I brought her. And then Susie I just thought was funny.
She's perfect.
This was something I saw online where this is a dog toy that Chewy or someone decided to produce, and all my friends tagged me in it, and I finally got one. Because one of my favorite things is delivering calves, and this is obviously Susie comes with a part, and you can take out and deliver a calf, and they are attached. So Susie and Mike, we'll call him Mike. Why not? He can be little Mike. They come together as a pair, and I just thought they were hilarious that this is a dog toy that anyone can purchase. And my dogs would give it probably a 10 out of 10. There's 2 dogs, and they each get a part. And then I might have to stand up maybe a little bit, hopefully. But there it is.
That's pretty cool.
There she is. That's my belt buckle. When you exhibit cattle, especially when you're a little kid, the coolest thing is to try and win a belt buckle. Usually in one of the parts where you're being judged on how you present yourself and how you present the animal, called showmanship, that is where you win a belt buckle. So I won many when I was showing, and then finally retired them since they were becoming vintage. They said 2007 on them. I know, crazy. And I got one that just, has my kind of credentials as a vet on it, but it's still, it gives me street cred for the producers that come in. I'm not going to lie. They come in and sometimes, I'm blonde or whatever, and they're like, who is this little blonde girl? I'm not really little, I'm pretty tall. But who is this blonde girl if I couldn't deliver this calf? Like, how are you going to do it? Or what do you know about cows? And I just kind of
Flash the belt buckle.
Yeah, just kind of roll back a little bit, and they're like, street cred immediately. She knows game. Like, she knows what she's doing. She knows
cow game.
Yeah, and I literally, it works. And it's I don't know, it's something I've always worn. Some people give me grief about it, but I know ball. That's all I'm going to say.
Exactly. Don't listen to the haters.
Yeah. Haters going to hate, but they're going to listen to me.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an educational pleasure.
Absolutely.
I've seriously learned so much. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to this episode of Tiger Talk. It has been a pleasure to have you as well. We hope that you've enjoyed learning all about food animal health from Dr. Strickland, and we hope you continue tuning in to our podcast and our news show. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, all.